I'm John Buchanan, and what we're going to do in this video is to create a harmony using Logic's Flex Pitch tool. Now, this is useful in a couple of different contexts. If you're working with sampled vocals and you don't have access to the original singer, then maybe you're going to have to use pitch correction to generate harmonies from an a cappella vocal. But even if you are working with a real singer, perhaps if you're both unfamiliar with how to actually sort of go about the process of just singing harmonies, you might want to work them out. And the great thing about working with Flex Pitch is you have a chance to work out what you want the notes to be before your singer then re-records them. Either way, this can be a really creative way of expanding the kind of vocal mix of your project. Now, to kind of get us to a place where we're ready to start thinking about harmonizing a vocal, we obviously need a vocal. So I've had some fun putting together a sort of backing track using Apple loops. I've certainly added to it with a few parts of my own as well. So there's a Rhodes part here where I've just written some chords, and I've got a bass line that I've put together as well. But I've also dragged in some elements of this track, including the vocals. So let's just have a listen. And then what we're going to do is just to spend a little bit of time thinking about harmony and melody and how they might lock together in a track like this. Okay, here's the track.
But I don't know if I make it back home.
Okay, so it's a really short little 4-bar section. Let's just listen to it again because there's quite a lot going on, and this time I put a loop on.
I don't know if I make it back home. I'm just stuck here, but I don't know if I make it back home.
Okay, so what I've done is I've taken 3 different bits of Clyde. Thank you, Clyde. I've given him an original sort of lead line track, which is up here, here. I've got a little answer phrase, which is happening in bar 4, and then I've processed this with a sort of slightly telephone-style EQ to give us this little sort of a cappella towards the end. And it's just this lead section here that we're going to harmonize. Okay, now, there are a couple of ways that you can think about harmony. If you're unfamiliar with music theory, then one thing you can do is to duplicate this track, flex pitch it, and start dragging notes around until you find notes that feel like they work. And that's absolutely fine. That's a completely legitimate way to create harmonies. But it would be remiss of me, having spent the summer giving you a music theory course, not to actually put this phrase under the microscope a little bit, so that we can actually think a little bit more in musical terms about what notes might fit well with the original line that's playing. Okay, so let's just have a little bit of a look at what's actually happening. Let's just listen to this lead line, these first 2 bars by themselves.
I don't know if I make it back home.
So we've got this little pickup here. Let's listen to that again.
But I don't know if I make it back home.
Okay, so it's a really bluesy kind of line. So if I come down to the Rhodes part for a second, I'm just going to solo both of these parts so I can actually play this instrument for a moment. So on the Rhodes part, we have a chance to obviously experiment a little bit with the notes that are being played. And Clyde is in D. And specifically, he's in D minor. So what we've got is this little pickup, which is playing through here, and then he's playing what we refer to as a D minor 7, or at least he's singing the notes in D minor 7. That's the notes, the set of notes that he's singing. So we've got this little pickup. So effectively, what I've done is to write a chord progression, which starts with a D minor 7. And then what I've done is I've moved to B flat major for bar 3. So what we get across those 2 different chords are support for the line, but we're effectively just changing the chord in bar 3.
But I don't know if I make it back home.
So if I play the bass note, you can see how the D becomes a B flat major. Now the reason why that's going to matter is because what I want to do is to stay within the scale of D minor when it comes to creating harmonies for this vocal. Now, if you're getting lost, you're thinking, what are you talking about? Do go and watch the music theory course that I put together over the summer, because there's plenty there which is going to provide you with an understanding of what I'm talking about. This is effectively how chords fit together, how chords relate to scales, and so on and so forth. And we are in the scale of D minor for this piece. And as a result of that, the chords that are going to fit together are going to be ones that belong to the scale of D minor. And therefore, what we get a chance to do is to potentially create a harmony that also belongs to D minor. And therefore, it's going to work well with this phrase. So effectively, just again, have a look at it one more time. I'm starting in D. And then what we get is these little phrases that are coming in, okay? So these little notes that are sitting there, and then the harmony moves to a C major, and then to a G minor. Okay, so this quite bluesy kind of feel. All right, so what we're gonna do in order to create our harmony is to take our lead line, and what we're then going to do is to duplicate it. And what that's gonna do is to give us an absolutely identical track. I'm gonna call this one harmony. And then what I'm going to do is to just simply grab these two regions. I'm not worried about the little pickup. I'm going to just grab these two regions here. And then what we'll do is we'll get to an opportunity to create the harmony that we want for this particular phrase. So of course, in order to do that, what I need to do is to turn on flex editing here, and then to select flex pitch, which is going to allow me to draw the notes that I want from a pitch point of view on top of this couple of regions. And what that in turn means is that they'll effectively be transposed. So in order to do that next, I need to double click on this phrase, and then what I'll see is that I have this track option. Now, if you happen to open this and it shows you the file, don't panic, just come across to track, and what you'll then see is the notes superimposed on top of the waveform. Now, of course, what I can do is to use Command and the arrows to allow me to see all of this phrase at once, get them all on screen at once. It doesn't matter that they're spread across two different regions. I can now see all of these notes, and we're in good shape. And then what I can see is the notes as they've come in and they've been analysed. Now, of course, playing them through on the piano is one thing, because of course that's absolutely precise. The thing about any vocal phrase is that there's going to be little bits of tuning variation. So you can see that even though I sort of suggested these first two notes were G's going up to A's, this first note's kind of been detected as a G sharp. But for now, we're not going to worry about that too much. What we're going to do instead is to start thinking in terms of our kind of D minor kind of a shape. So here is the phrase as it sort of comes up. Now, I can run both of these phrases together, but that's going to sound kind of weird because, remember, we're superimposing one track on top of another and we haven't changed any notes yet. So if you press play now, you'll find it all sounds a bit phasey and strange.
But I don't know.
So you can hear the two parts phasing with each other. But by running them together in solo mode like this, we can definitely start thinking a little bit about the notes that we want to sort of go after. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think a little bit about harmonizing this in thirds. Now, in music theory terms, thirds are pretty safe. They're a pretty useful place to start, because what we can do is we can think about notes, how they relate to scales, but we're effectively using different notes that are sort of dominant within those scales. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to select these first two notes, which I can see are more or less detected as a G. Yes, they're a little bit sharp, but that's okay. And what I'm then going to do is to say, okay, I'm going to grab all of these notes here, and I'm going to move them up a third. So in other words, the G is going to become a B, and that's going to take this collection of notes up to this point. But then, because I want this second note to exist within the scale of D minor, it can't be a C sharp because that note doesn't exist in that scale. So what I'm then going to do is to select these two notes and move them down to a C. Now, we always get these kind of funny little formanty noises when we work with flex pitch, but that's okay. They're just playing back the pitches for us. That's actually quite a useful, helpful place to be. So now I've got a decision to make. I know that my first chord is actually D minor, but the apex, the top of the phrase that our good friend Clyde is singing, is actually a C. So I've got to decide whether or not I want to make these notes obviously in D minor, or whether or not I want to not do that. Again, let me show you what I mean. The note C in the context of D minor is what's referred to as its leading note. It's not actually D or F or A, which are the three notes that make a D minor chord. Instead, they are the seventh of the scale, which is not quite so strong a note in the context of D minor. So what I think I'm going to do is to take these two notes here, And I'm going to take them up to an F. Oh, I'm moving them left to right at the moment. Let's just grab them again. And that's going to give me a little bit more of a note in D minor, because F is part of a D minor chord, and effectively that should feel a little bit more D minor-y than me moving this to an E or to another note that's just slightly outside of an obvious D minor chord. Okay, so we've moved a few notes. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like so far.
And I don't know.
Okay, so what we've got is this really nice shape where suddenly we're kind of rooting those notes much more to D minor. We've got the C from the original, but we've added an F, which is much more obviously part of a D minor chord, and that's working really nicely. Now, okay, Clyde stays on a C here, although it looks like he's kind of dropping to an A here, and that just hasn't really been detected in the same way, so I'm going to keep that in mind. I might even choose to chop this here, so that I've got a note which I can sort of tune separately. So I'm sort of changing the way that that's been detected. I might put that on a C. And then what I might do is to see what happens if I now come to an E, or maybe I stay on an F. We'll experiment with both. In fact, what I'm going to do is keep the first one on an F and have this one fall.
And I don't know. And I don't know.
Okay, that's really nice because it's a little ghost of reverb. I actually thought that was a sung note, but it's actually part of the reverb. So either I could keep it all on the F, or we could have a little bit of fun with that reverb and just bring it down so it just changes subtly in the background.
And I don't know. And I don't know.
I really like that. Okay, let's move on to the second bar. So at this point, what's happening is, at the beginning of bar 3 at least, I've got a B flat major chord. Okay, so we're not quite there yet. We've got a few more notes to kind of fit in around our sort of D minor chord. Okay, so Clyde here is singing an A. I'm going to move him up to a C. And then I've got a couple more C's here, and what I'm going to do with these is to take them up to an E, I think. Let's just see what happens there. So that's back to the same place that we were before. Should these be E's or F's? Well, we'll see. I'm going to keep that there for now. I'm definitely going to take this note up here to a D. And then what we'll do is we'll think a little bit about what's happening now. Okay, so at bar 3, I'm moving in my Rhodes part to a B flat major chord. That's B flat, D, and F. Those are my strongest notes. Okay, so I can see here that Clyde is singing a D. So I'm going to take his note here up to an F. And he's got a little C happening here, which I think I'll move up to an E. I'm staying in thirds. Okay, here's a C. That can go up to an E. That, okay, is an interesting sort of slightly bluesy note that he's singing here from a D flat, which is kind of a bluesy little thing that's happening. I'm going to keep that up here as an F. And then we're dropping here to a C, so that can go to an E. So I'm going to just slightly nudge that up to an F. We'll see what that sounds like. And then we're dropping here at the end of this phrase. So I probably need to press play and have a bit of a listen to how this sounds now, because, yeah, it's easy to kind of get lost a little bit as we're thinking through notes. Let's just have a listen to where we're at so far.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Okay, so here we're at this little drop away at the end. That's all sounding really nice up to that point. So we've got a G, an F, and a D, and we've got this over our B flat major chord. So what I might do would be to think about maybe making this a B flat, this an A, and then he's sort of coming down in pitch. And I like that, but I wonder whether or not we might be a bit bolder than that and go the other way. We'll make that a B flat, and that looks like it's going up to a C a little bit, which is nice. And then maybe we might end up on an A, which would be the fifth of, or at least a fifth above the original note. Let's try.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Okay, it's nearly nice. This is a little bit weird and wonky here.
Make it back home.
So I'm wondering if we need to just push this up a little bit. Again, I think I'm going to split this note so that we're able to sort of slightly treat those independently of each other. I definitely want that to be a C. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to ever so slightly use some of the tools around each of these notes to slightly pull back a couple of different things. So at the moment, we've just been pushing notes around in terms of their overall pitch, their sort of semitone pitch. And I'm doing that simply by clicking on a note and just dragging it up or down. But around the outside, what I've got a chance to do is to adjust different things. So this is a fine pitch. This allows me to move between semitones. Up in the left-hand corner, we've got the opportunity to change pitch drift. That's literally how a note comes in from one to another. So this kind of overall white line is controlling pitch drift. I've got gain, which is going to give me volume control. I've got vibrato, which is controlling literally how much the note vibratos, which is going to be useful to me in a second. And then I've got a formant shift, and that allows me to change the kind of character of the voice, whether or not it's got a slightly more sort of deep or slightly more overblown, almost kind of, if we push it too far, almost chipmunky quality, I guess. So it's the vibrato that I want to change. I'm just going to rein this in a little bit so that that note doesn't come too far away. Okay, this I think is where the problem is, because we've got this slightly bluesy note. So what I might do is to take this up to a B flat and get it properly in tune, which I'm doing using the fine pitch. Let's see.
Make it back home. Make it back home. Make it back home.
Okay, that feels nicer to me. Again, I'm just going to use the fine pitch to really get this note in tune too. Let's listen to the whole phrase.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home. Make.
Okay, that's working really nicely. Okay, so we've got our kind of pitch sorted, and to stress, yes, I've definitely used a little bit of music theory knowledge to help me identify what sorts of notes might work, but yeah, I could absolutely have just done that with my ear. In terms of chopping notes up, deciding where they're going to work, just put a loop around something, and if it's not sounding right, just keep nudging notes up and down. But it definitely helps to kind of get the notes under your fingers if you can, and to think in terms of scales. Now, the only thing about harmonies is that normally, if I was working with a singer and I was producing backing vocals as well as a lead vocal, I would definitely tonally and volume-wise shift the backing vocals so that they were more obviously backing vocals. So I'm going to do that now. Firstly, what I'm going to do is to open up an EQ. I'm going to scoop the low end out of this, so that we're just shaving out some of the bass. And I'm also going to just make sure that we're also making a slightly more sort of gentle tone maybe in this frequency area as well, just so we're sort of rolling out some of the lows and it all just sounds a little bit airier and nicer. And what I'm also going to do is to back the volume down a little bit. And what I might do is add a little bit of space to this as well. I think I've got a reverb, sure enough, on this channel as well. So on this harmony part, what I've done is to just sort of set the vocal back from a volume perspective, from a tone perspective, using EQ, and with a little bit of reverb too.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Okay, let's put the whole of the arrangement together. Let's have a listen to it now.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home. Oh, I'm just stuck here.
Okay, so this nice little brass lick I've got here, which I like a lot, I'm also going to turn down because it's a bit much. I just want that to be kind of in the background. Okay, let's put a little bit of a loop around this because it feels pretty good to me. I keep missing the upbeat, sorry.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home. Oh, I'm just stuck here. And I don't know if I'll make it back home. Oh, I'm just stuck here. And I don't know if I'll make back home. Oh,
Okay, and you can see I'm just doing some other bits and pieces as well, just to make it feel even more like a backing vocal. So I've added a little bit of delay, I've turned it down a little bit more, and using stereo pan, I've just ever so slightly set it off to the right-hand side, so it's not fighting the lead vocal quite so much. Okay, so we've heard the whole arrangement sort of by itself. So what we're going to do now is just really, so you can really lock in on what we've done here, is let's listen to the parts by themselves one more time. So this is our original lead vocal. I think it's really important to really stress this. So here is the phrase. I'll take this loop off. This is the original phrase.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
This is the harmony that we've created all by itself, just soloed.
I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Which sounds really weird when you play it by itself, and when we put the two things together, it sounds like this.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Okay, which sounds a little bit more natural. In the moment we underpin it with the chords and maybe the bass as well, hopefully it really will lock in.
And I don't know if I'll make it back home.
Okay, so you can really begin to see the value of creating harmonies like this. And it's really worth stating that, of course, this is valuable even if you are working with singers. Not all singers are comfortable just improvising harmonies. It's quite a complicated thing to do. It's definitely something that people get better at the longer their sort of singing careers go on. So to have spent some time maybe creating harmonies so that when your singer comes back in the studio, you can play them what you've made and you can sort of work around those shapes, is a great approach. But certainly if you're working with samples or phrases like this where we don't have access to the original singers, but you definitely want to embellish your sort of vocal productions with harmony, obviously flex pitch is your friend as far as all this stuff is concerned. And do bear in mind that the more you understand about music theory, the easier it will be to put phrases like this together. Not essential, but definitely really helpful. So do go and have a look at the music theory course as well.